Gretchen, thank you
Hi.
so much for agreeing to be on our Using Leadership Development to Transform Preschool and Elementary Education one day summit. We are pre-recording this for people who are joining us live, just so you know. And Gretchen is fantastic. She has been out in the field supporting coaches, school leaders for, I don't know, a gazillion years. Does it
It
feel
feels
like
like
that,
it.
Gretchen?
Hmm.
I know you've been doing it for at least a couple of decades. I think probably since like 2000 or something,
Yeah.
if I'm correct. So
Hmm.
you've been doing it for a long time. And the reason I reached out to you is because initially I think I saw you through some resources you were talking about through Teacher Pay Teacher
Hmm.
and on Pinterest. So that's how you caught my eye.
That's
And
interesting. Cool.
yeah, and so we'll tell you in a little bit how you can jump on and grab some of those resources. But Gretchen, tell us a little bit about what you do. Let's just start there. What do you do?
Right now, I support teachers and those that lead them. And our focus is to ensure teachers grow in the classroom because we know when that happens, students grow as well. So, whether I work directly with the teachers themselves or I work with a teacher leader that works with the teachers, the goal is still the same to make sure that quality instruction is happening in every classroom.
Awesome. So now let's use that as a jump off point and dive right into leadership development.
Hmm.
What does that look like in your day-to-day life with either teachers directly or teacher leaders or coaches or instructional specialists, whatever they're called and whatever program they're in?
I would say when I was in the classroom, there was no such thing. So let's just start at ground zero. I
Mhm.
had to figure out how to lead through having my own student teachers, sharing what worked with me in the classroom, reading their body language of, is that the right way to give feedback? Do I give too much? Like, do you want to talk it out and practice? And so when you had multiple people coming through, you start to find your own voice and style. And because of that, my principal said, hey, do you want to lead your colleagues? So any new teacher to the school would come under your wing and you'd meet with them and observe them and look at lesson plans with them and all the things. But again, there was no training for any of these things. So I was like, yes, I love this. I love it better than my full-time job teaching. So I did whatever I could to help these teachers. And then my facilitator came to me. She was an official teacher leader to have a facilitator title. And so she did have some professional development to help her with leadership. And she said, how would you like to help me revamp the new teacher support program here? We'll do book studies and we'll create this curriculum map and this guidebook. And I'm like, yes, I've learned so much helping all these people the last few years. I would love to do that. So we set it up and she's like, can you help me run the meetings? So then I was running the meetings. And again, it was lighting me up, but it was
Mhm.
totally figure this out on your own. And the more people
Mhm.
I led, the more I figured out what is leadership, what makes an effective leader. Every time I bombed, I thought, okay, where did it go wrong? And what should I do different? And so it took so much longer for
Mhm.
me to just become great at leadership. And I still have a long way to go, but I'm certainly not where I was, thankfully. And then I got an email that said, hey, would you be interested in coaching new teachers in your district, kindergarten through seniors in high school? I thought, well, yeah, I'm like doing that now. So you mean full time? And yes. And so I was like, yeah, I have been loving this leadership, but I didn't know what that would look like since I was still teaching. And I love that I got to stay in my district. I knew all these people and I was meeting principals and attending different PD workshops. I was meeting other teacher leaders. So it was a halfway. I didn't have to completely leave and I could, work in the same kind of population. And I loved that. And then that initiative moved on to other cities and towns. And I was left making a decision. Do I want to go back into the classroom and wait for the next opportunity to come, or do I want to make the opportunity? So I made it. I took my blog that was just talking about what was happening in the classroom and I started saying, how can I teach lessons I was learning? That's why my website's always a lesson. There's either you're teaching one or you're learning one, but there's a lesson in there somewhere. And I was starting to teach teachers through my blog of what makes quality instruction and thinking about all these leadership tips. And then leaders were coming to me and saying, well, how do you do that? How do you help a teacher grow? Or how do you support a teacher who's struggling? I'm like, well, what I tried was blank, blank, and blank. And so then I'm now teaching them again, figuring this all out on my own. And then through the podcast, and then you were mentioning resources through Teachers Pay Teachers, I've been able to provide professional development and leadership and in quality instruction. And so it's all kind of married each other in this really windy way. But I will still say there is very limited support out there
Yes.
for people that want to be leaders in education. If you want to go the administrative route, there's plenty. If you
Yes.
want to do a coach or facilitator, there's a little bit. But if you still want to teach, but still lead your peers, there is nothing.
Yes. I
So that's a
agree.
roundabout answer.
It's actually a great answer. And I know that many people listening are going to be able to identify with it because everything you talked about was organic, right? You either fell into it or somebody saw saw the potential and
Right.
asked you to step into it. And one of the first thing you said, and I wrote it down, is that when you came fresh out of school,
Mm-hmm.
right, that there was nothing out there. And it's really interesting because as a profession, we get so much training, whether it's in school or in out of school and professional development around instructional strategies, right? Or around engagement strategies or around how to really work the curriculum, right? Or how to individualize instruction. I mean, everything. Yet we don't get professional development on how do we collaborate with our team, right? How do we communicate in such a way that we're being able to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly?
True.
How do we set things up within our classrooms, especially if you're in the like preschool and elementary, where many of us have coworkers, or we might be blended, or we have pairs or assistant? How do we set things up so that everyone has a really good understanding of who's doing what, where, when, and how?
Right. Yes.
And it's interesting because all of these things impact on our ability to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, still to this day, there is nothing built in when we talk about that at within our higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
And like you
You
said,
nailed
people are
it.
coming out and there's still not much available, and hence our summit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're singing my song,
You're
definitely.
singing my song too.
So,
High five.
so here's my question for you, because you
Mm-hmm.
keep talking about leadership, and if we can get to some of the nuts and bolts of that, what does that look like, say, when you're coaching a new teacher?
Mm-hmm.
What
Well,
would you
I
say
think
is a leadership skill or even a disposition or mindset?
I think leadership starts in the classroom. So that new teacher's already a leader, and you're helping them not become the leader you are, that you were in the classroom, but what's their style, their personality, and their strength. So you've got to watch them. And then you've got to ask them, hey, what are your goals to be a teacher? Do you want to be really great in a subject area? I know elementary does departmentalize when they can. Do you want to become known for being really great at small group instruction? Like, get to know the person you're leading, because when you do, it's so much easier to help them grow in the area you know they want to grow in, but then mesh together what the school or the district idea is for proficiency that year. Maybe there's a certain initiative or curriculum or whatever, but you got to know the person. And so just like a teacher looks at the kids to better know them and better lead them and set up structures and protocols in the class so they become leaders in the classroom,
Mhm.
the same thing is true when I'm working with them. And so you've got to take the time to sit and get to know them and say, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And how can I help you get there? And then I will do my best knowing what the school's looking for and the district is looking for and what grade instruction is. Like, I will bring all that, but you've got to like meet me in the middle, because this is a partnership. And I think a lot of leadership is thought of as a hierarchy, and you just do what you're told and you really don't have an opinion. But the truth is, in education, really strong partnerships create growth. And so if we look at, I'm helping this teacher, you were mentioning in planning or PLCs, you're literally sitting side by side. You're not behind a desk telling them where they missed the mark and what they need to do differently. You're hashing it out together. What are the obstacles you faced? Why do you think that's happening? And I think questioning, Not giving the answers, but questioning is the biggest leadership skill that I don't see enough of and a lot of other teacher leaders. And it's because they're not taught to do that. They're taught to give and to tell. And that's how I was taught as well when I first started coaching. And once I learned if I would ask better questions, I got to know them better. I could flag areas that needed repeating. I knew where the gaps were in their understanding. And we progressed faster because I was taking the time to get to the root of whatever the issue was, and then we could work backwards to fill in those holes. And so my answer to you is a lot of the mindset and a lot of the helpful tips I can give to you on leadership is probably nothing you've heard of before, and it's really about being the guy in the back seat, really watching the leader do the driving and giving the adjustments and the tips along the way, not standing in front of the car dragging it down the road. It's not going to work.
I'm sorry. I'm chuckling to myself. So many people are going to think that I like paid you to say what you said,
Oh, really?
because I talk about that all the time within team agreements. And for those of you who know me, that's great. And for those of you who don't, I spend a lot of time talking about vision and speaking into vision. In fact, when a training that I do on characteristics of highly effective teams, that's exactly where we start. We talk about one of the things you have to be really clear on is what is your vision? And
Mhm.
that was the first thing you said. You want to ask that question of the teams that you're working with and find out who they are. What are their goals? What are they looking toward? Because, and it's funny because I also use the analogy of the car. You talk about standing in front of it, right, dragging it
Mhm.
up the hill. I talk about standing behind it and pushing it up the hill.
Either are not great,
And
right?
they're both the same thing. And understanding is that the vision is the gas that actually fires that car up and gets that car going up the hill by itself.
Yeah.
Right. And when people are tied into their vision, you don't have to coerce, right? You don't have to, you probably hear my cat in the
I was
background.
wondering, I'm like, is that my child? What's happening?
No, she's just having a fit because she wants some attention, and I'm
Oh,
giving it to you. So that's my fur baby. It's hysterical.
sweet.
So, and that's what we get with Zoom.
Hey, it's real life.
It's real life. And so having said that, that when we have that strong vision, especially within our teams, and not just for the lead, but also the assistant, the pair, also our itinerants, right? So as we're doing more blended classrooms, as we're having people come in and push in or pull out, having all of them have that vision actually helps them to be engaged and stay engaged.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
going to work
ownership.
so much. Yes, it's ownership.
Hmm.
And then we get to validate it. Like,
Hmm.
oh, how cool is that? You want to be known for small group instruction. Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
What does that
What
look
does
like?
that look like? Would you stop being in my brain?
It's from being in the work. I mean, you talked about that collaborative partnership, right? And so, again, when we talk about leadership, that's critical. Hierarchy does not work when we are talking about leadership. And
Yeah.
part of leadership is, again, not only that strong communication, but actually sending out those ripples so that you are empowering those around you as well. Everybody gets lifted up, everybody gets elevated.
Yeah.
So I love that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I think of it like dominoes. If I can find the one skill that's going to have the greatest impact, that's going to hit all the other dominoes and fix some of the other issues along the way. When I go into classrooms, you can get distracted by a beautiful bulletin board or just the cute kids. And you could give feedback to help a teacher get better in some areas. But honestly, if you're not talking about the design of the lesson, student engagement, or how they're managing their classroom, you're not picking a big enough lever that's going to have the impact you need to have. We have such a short amount of time in school already, and then leaders have a shorter amount of time to help teachers grow. So if you're going to go in there and nitpick some small problems, they may get fixed, but if you pick the big levers, they're going to knock down all those tiny dominoes and you're going to be off to the races. And that's another leadership tip is really focusing, am I picking the biggest rock here that's going to propel this person forward? Because you can get very distracted on other issues that, yes, if you had all the time in the world you could discuss, but it is kind of holding back and making sure you are choosing the right area to focus on.
And so I love that as well. So let me just kind of go sideways a little bit with that and talk about the use of data as
Hmm.
it relates to leadership. Because when I hear you say, levers, that's instantly what comes to my mind. What data are we using to support our decisions or
Mm.
giving us the biggest impact or leverage, as you've been referring to? So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, when you look at what a school district chooses for their rubric for the performance of a teacher, that indicates what they value. So you've got to start already aligning your feedback and your strategy to what they've outlined there. And it's generally in those three areas that I've seen. And in addition, when you are helping teachers become stronger and better, and you're looking at on the rubric all the different levels to move forward, it really starts to stretch the teacher's ability to actually give up control in a lot of these areas, build in more creativity, and think outside the box. And so, yes, you want to help teachers do those things, but the way in which you do that is it might look a little different. So, when you're in a classroom, you're looking at student work samples. Are they working at high levels? Did it look like the teacher was prepared for whatever the students were working on? Is it quiet, or are the students working in pairs and knowing what to talk about? That's that management piece. And then when the students are engaging, how rigorous is it? Is it raise your hand if you got C, or give me a thumbs up if you get it? Or is it give me an example of blank, And so by being in a classroom and just watching, you can really tell the levels at which the teacher's operating. And I know as a teacher, I hated when they'd come in and they asked the one kid in the room who had no idea what was going on. And I was like, oh, but I'm doing so great up here, So there is a little gap here where we have to say, let's pull back. But student performance data, student survey data. For me in my own leadership, it's getting the teachers to give me feedback. It's their students' scores that we've been working on. It's the teachers' lesson plans when we design them together. It's projects and backwards planning that we've created, those kind of schedules. All those things are proof of the pudding. So it doesn't have to be a standardized test to tell you that the kids are doing great. It's all these moving pieces that you can see in any classroom at any time to see if what you're doing actually is having an impact.
Absolutely. And I'm going to bring it down a little bit in age because many of the people who are going to be listening are also in the preschool realm. And we
Yeah.
know we don't have standardized tests there. We
Mm-hmm.
do have work samples. They just look different than how they look for elementary students.
Mm-hmm.
And especially nowadays with Zoom and cameras, and I know that a lot of people are doing things like swivel, they get to actually videotape themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That is where we can get so much data about
Totally.
what is the impact of what you just said or who you said it to or how you said it.
Yeah.
And how did you use the materials to really deepen the conversation,
Mm.
right? What was that back and forth interaction looking like, right? The turn and the serve and return,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's not just about the number, but did we get to quality? Did that child walk away with a better, deeper understanding of
Yes.
whatever that concept was or that skill based
Mm-hmm.
on the interaction,
Yeah.
right? So we love data. And here's where I talk a lot about it fitting in with leadership. Oh, I just get so excited. I love data. Is that when we talk about leadership and having that disposition, there's an understanding is that the data is neutral, right? It's this understanding, and I talk about it a lot in terms of failing forward, meaning that we're going to make mistakes. And as teachers, we tend to be perfectionists. I'm going to raise my
Mm-hmm.
hand. I am a
Mm-hmm.
recovering perfectionist.
Me
I
too.
own I own that. And so we beat ourselves up when that lesson didn't go as well as we wanted it to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we didn't get the outcome. And actually, that's just data telling us what worked and what didn't.
Yeah.
What do we get to tweak or change about that?
Yeah. I love what you're saying here. And I'm glad you brought up preschool. So, you could have a checklist. The students know their numbers, their letters, their days of the week, the seasons of the year. There are things that curriculum wise students need to know. And the teacher can have that per each student and showcase how strong do they know these things. And then when I'm in the classroom, how are you pulling that data? Are you asking when they're lining up to sing a song? Are you leaning and listening as they're talking with a peer? Like there's all sorts of ways to collect that. So I'm glad you brought up the preschool aspect, because although it's not the formal data in elementary school, there certainly are ways to build it in. It just might look a little different. And I would also say, I'm glad you brought up the whole camera situation, because reflection is a huge part of growth. If you don't set up an opportunity for the person that's doing the work to reflect themselves before meeting with you, the leader, then you're missing out on this whole opportunity. Because when the teacher can look and say, oh gosh, I say all the time, or my back is to the kids, or I didn't finish everything I planned on that lesson plan, it gives you an opportunity to ask better questions. And you'll say, why do you think that's the first thing you noticed? Or what impact do you think that had on the kids? And do you think they noticed? Why did you slow up at that portion? And that helps you as a leader develop your strategy, work on that relationship, and ask better questions. But they're doing the heavy lifting, because they're taking the time to step back, get some perspective, watch themselves. And they start out very nitpicky, like my hand's always on my hip, or I'm always on the left side. But they learn over time to really listen to the words they're using, and who they're spending the most time with, and how many examples they're giving when they're describing something. And that's your job, is to prompt them in that process. And over time, you're passing the baton to them to take ownership in their own growth. And you yourself are still leading them, because you are giving them the skills to be more efficient and effective.
Absolutely. So now you're talking about the relationship where literally we get to coach ourselves out of the job.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know at the beginning of the partnership, we're lifting, right? I say we're helping them hold their vision, or we're supporting is a better word. We get to support them hold their vision until they're able to hold it themselves.
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
by the time we're done with this cycle, they have full ownership. They're empowered. They have taken over their learning, their own professional development,
Mhm.
and they're off and running. Now we know we've done a really, really good job,
Right.
because
Right.
it's like, okay, great. And then, like you said, then we get to scaffold them at a higher level.
I was going to say that.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now they get to mentor, right? Or coach or partner with somebody else and
Mhm.
grow in a different way. Because as
Yeah.
leaders, we're always continuing to grow. We don't stop because we just have one particular, or we've mastered one thing.
Yeah.
Leadership is forever.
Yeah, and it reminds me when I was doing guided reading, and my facilitator came in. She said, "You're not really teaching a skill. You're talking about the book you're using. You're talking about the content." And I thought, huh, I guess I am. And she said, that means you are going to work twice as hard, because there's always going to be a new book, which means there's going to be new information. But if you focus on the skill, you're repeating that same process with the kids. That way they can apply that to their different book, but it's the same skill. And I thought, I've been doing this all wrong, but it made perfect sense. And it's the same thing in leadership. If you're helping them learn and grow and become more effective, and fires yourself from being their leader, it's you're giving them skills they can use in this setting or in the next one. But it doesn't matter. The point is that you're allowing them to grow and develop, to take that to the next level, to apply it to a different subject area or a different type of job and education. So you want them to be able to learn a skill, and not just say, this lesson plan and this one point fix this. No, it's a bigger picture that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're getting down to the bottom of our time together, and I want you to just share a little bit about the website and what you have available for people. You and I think we're going to have to come back and have more conversation.
Yes, we are so aligned. It's weird. I
Because
promise we don't know each other.
I know, no, this is literally our first time meeting each other. We're just so much in sync. And when
Mhm.
we do that, I would really like to dig in more into mindset and dispositions,
Okay.
because when we're working with our teacher leaders or whoever we're working with, it's one thing to have the skill. It's something else to have the mindset
Hmm.
to actually implement the skill,
Yes.
right?
You
To
got to be
have the
ready.
You've got to be ready. So how do we support people in being ready? How do we support people to know you're going to fail?
Yeah.
We call it failing
That's
forward.
okay.
And it's okay. It's actually, you need to do that to learn. How do we
Yeah.
stretch people into that thinking so that it's okay? And
Yeah.
that, yes,
We
I
don't
know
look
you're
at it like
here.
it's we
Go,
don't
go
look at
ahead.
it like it's sports, you know. You wouldn't
Yes.
never say, "Why do you keep doing those layup drills?" You would never say that because practice makes you better. So why do we look at teaching like you better get it right the first time because that's all you got? It's like,
Yes,
no.
I know it. Okay, yeah, you're gonna get me up on my soapbox about how we don't within our education field, we don't give our educators a lot of grace.
No.
And so, okay, yeah, we're going to stop there because you and I can just keep on going. So we'll have to come back and do a part two.
Okay.
But before we go, it's just so everyone knows,
Mhm.
on the website, we actually have a page for Gretchen. You can go there. You can learn more about her. There'll be a link to her website. So you can actually go up and take a look at all the great stuff she has. But Gretchen, is there any one or two things that's up there as resources that you want people to know about that might be a
Sure.
really good jump off point?
Yeah, go to alwaysalesson.com. At the top, you'll find all my social media handles. So pick the one you like to interact on and let's connect and talk. There's a blog, there's a podcast, the Empowering Educators podcast. There are professional development webinars, there's swag, there's all sorts of stuff. It's my home, it's my hub. I love it.
Yes. I've gone up there and I got to go back because I was only up there
Mm-hmm.
for like, 20 or 30 minutes, and I know there was a lot more there for me to dig into.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I really, really, really want to thank you for joining us on our virtual summit. Like I said, we'll have to come back and play together a little bit more.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
please.
the sandbox is going to get big, I think, for us.
Well, thanks so much.
You're welcome. And go back, give your babies hugs. And my fur baby is finally stopped. So I got to make sure she's not getting into trouble because we know what happens when they're quiet. And for those of you who are joining us, thank you for being on our 1 day live virtual summit. And I hope you stay with us so that we can see our next speaker.